you know that the game is to blame black men, right? And the game is to divide. And like we have all these little underbellies of people who play into these gender wars. They're all over the interwebs playing into these gender wars. They're all knuckleheads. But if you know that the end game is to kind of blame ADOS men, especially for whatever the violence may be, then that tweet is irresponsible. Regardless of what you said to Jared Ball, that becomes an irresponsible tweet. But she said something else too that really kind of, she put up another tweet that really kind of made me think, because then she brought up Steve Bannon. And the person that she tweeted was basically saying, I get what she was saying because I get Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon was basically, in their interpretation, so you can look up the tweet, I'll leave it alone, you look it up. In their interpretation, Steve Bannon was saying black people, or black men specifically, need somebody to look down on. If you can, support is conditional on you doing something else. So and she brought up trans people and said, now we're getting black women to look down on trans people and engage in transphobia. And I'm just like, what is she talking about? Like that's not what's happening at all. Now, and even if you say that's what happens, you have to then go back to the Democratic Party and say, don't they do that with black women? So if Republicans are playing a game with black men, and I believe they are currying favor and they are trying to play a game. If they're playing a game with black men, aren't Democrats playing the same game with black women? And don't we have to offer the same critical lens for both groups of people? Why or why not, ma'am? Because here's what, just to give you all some context in terms of Bannon, he said a couple things, and I just want to give the proper political context in terms of what he said. So he said the Democratic Progressive Party cannot rule if they don't get 90% of the black vote. If we cut into the black vote, if we make it 80-20, we can win 100 congressional seats this time, Bannon said. So he's saying that, like, listen, there is an opportunity to peel away these voters, especially black men. And this is something he said a while ago. This was in a tweet. African American males are also another central part of this is Bannon, of our coalition. And you wait, we're going to get 50%. We're going to get 50% of that vote in 2022. And once we do that, we can govern for 100 years. Right? So he has a play for he understands, and it's perfect political thinking. If the Democrats are playing for black women, if you are the Republican Party, your play is for black men or ADOS men. Politics. That's a play. That's what you would do. There's nothing nefarious about that, except that neither party is trying to offer us anything worth anything. That's the most nefarious thing, not the fact that, oh my God, these Republicans trying to steal or trying to take away black men. But one thing that nobody or none of these people who keep talking seem to understand, right? One that they don't kind of seem to understand is what ADOS men in this country are doing in terms of their support for Republicans. Now, I agree with one thing. We are way too reflexive. It's either Democrat or Republican, and we jump out of hot pans and into frying pans and into hot pans and out of frying pans and into pan. Hey, it's hot over there. I'm gonna jump out of fish grease into chicken grease. Well, I just don't know how that's gonna work out for you, Hotfoot. I just don't. So we are very reactionary. In terms of how we do things. That's a problem, because sometimes you have to build a third way. Sometimes you can't be reactionary. Right? So, if you can't be reactionary, you have to find a third way. So I get all that. But nobody is thinking about why. Because that's the question that you have to have. Why are if we would agree, now I would want to take out, I would like to see a study, and it is funny, Antonio and I talked about this. I would like to see a study of how many, I want to break out different groups. Like, let's break out Nigerian Americans. Let's break out Haitians. Let's break out Haitian Americans, who especially the ones who just got here. First, we should break it out first generation second. Let's break out a lot of these people and see how they vote as opposed to ADOS people. But even if we just talk about ADOS men, what we have to talk about is what they are doing in reaction to a political system that they don't view as serving them. This is not about anything else other than, why aren't you wondering, instead of saying, and instead of putting up that tweet, and I find that tweet offensive because you cannot, if you cannot compare a group of men who are incarcerated at the highest level of any other group in the world and say then that we're the police. No, they are not. Like, how can you say, well, black men is the police? You can't say black people are the police, but you certainly can't say man or woman, but you certainly can't say, looking at the incarceration rate of ADOS men, that they are the police. They are policed. They are not the police. And you can play with that group because the group has no power. And instead of interrogating what being powerless in America means and what kind of political reaction you would have with being that powerless in America, nobody's currying favor to them. At least Democrats are talking about black girl magic. They got everybody walking around with Kamala. They are at least playing to your ego, even though they don't give you policies. They are not playing to ADOS men at all, except to call them stupid and say that you don't need anything and say that you just don't know enough how to vote or whatever. Right? It's just very dismissive, and that kind of dismissiveness in party politics in terms of policy and in terms of rhetoric has a consequence, but nobody wants to talk about that part. And let me just bring up another part. How in the world do you nominate Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee for president, given what he did in terms of mass incarceration and who mass incarceration impacted the most, which was ADOS men, and then say, why are you thinking about voting Republican? You took the man who did the worst to this group of people, and you decided not only we're not going to punish him, but we are going to nominate him, and you doggone well better vote for him. You cannot do that as a political party or as a group of people and then wonder why this group of men is not feeling you. That's part of the reason so many of them fall, so many of them fall to people like Tariq Nasheed and the underbelly of YouTube, because they don't feel like anybody speaks for them. So they find the biggest knucklehead in the world sometimes. Not all the time. We know most men aren't watching this because we know how many million ADOS men there are in America, and we know what the views are on these shows. But what I'm saying is, everybody's going to go find a champion. I'm just telling you. People are going to go find their champion. It'd be the wrong champion, but you have to ask yourself, what did you do? What did you do? How did we get here? Now, I want to bring up something else, because this is important. I want to go back to, I don't want to do, we do a lot of recent studies, and I appreciate that. But I think sometimes what happens is that we forget the past. Like nobody, people say stuff like nobody could anticipate what happened to the ADOS men, and nobody could anticipate what they was going through, and nobody could anticipate what was going to happen with mass incarceration. Joe didn't know. Nobody knew. So let me bring up, I'm going to bring up another part in a second, but I just want to bring this up really quick. Because I hate that argument. Nobody knew. Mass imprisonment. Now, this is like 2004, this study. Right? Mass imprisonment and the life course, race and inequality in the U.S., in the U.S. incarceration, Now, this is just the abstract, and I'm going to go to another little quote real quick. Although growth in the U.S. prison population over the past 25 years has been widely discussed, few studies examine changes in inequality in imprisonment. We studied penal inequality by estimating lifetime risks of imprisonment for black and white men at different levels. Don't y'all miss that? Well, you could find a study sometimes just had black and white. It didn't have everybody else. Nobody said need to say black and brown. Nobody needed to say black and Latino. Nobody needed to say none of that. I mean, we could just talk about, it really is something. It really is something. Combining administrative survey and census data, we estimate that among men born between 1965 and 1969, 3% of Now understand, don't rush past this date. 1965 and 1969. Now this was in 2004. This is a study from 2004. We estimate that among men born between 1965 and 1969, 3% of whites and 20% of blacks had served time in prison by their early 30s. The risks of incarceration are highly stratified by education. Among black men born during this period, 30% of those without college education and nearly 60% of high school dropouts went to prison by 1999. 60%. Let me read that one more time because y'all didn't hear me. Among black men born during this period, 30% of those without college education and nearly 60% of high school dropouts went to prison by 1999. So you are seeing a majority of black high school dropouts go to prison. Those are majority ADOS men. That's who you see getting locked up. 60% of the high school dropouts get locked up. That's 1999. Tell me who didn't know. They absolutely knew. They put this thing on roller skates. They threw gasoline on the fire. The novel pervasiveness of prison indicates the emergence of incarceration as a new stage in life, in the life course of young, low-skilled black men. So what they're saying to you is that this has become part of the life stage. This is one of the life stages that ADOS men go through. Now, it is expected. Low-skilled ADOS men, it is expected. And you know what they did in terms of immigration? Not only did they say, well, we're going to put you in jail and it's expected. And if you low-skilled, 60%, if you a high school dropout, 60% of y'all going to jail. We're going to import, when you talk about immigration, we're going to import people in here are going to be competition. That's going to make your opportunity dwindle even more because you already got a record, baby. So we put you in jail, right? And then we're going to import some low-skilled workers to compete with you. So what do you think your outcomes look like? I'm just asking. This is an old study, 2004, and they're talking about by 1999. This is an old study. Everybody knew. Stop telling me somebody did. They did. Well, I don't know. Could have been. No, they knew what the outcomes were, and nobody. And the thing is, nobody cared. Like nobody's heart was broken for black men. People did not give no care. I'm sure their mamas cried in the courtroom and all kind of stuff. But I'm talking about as a community, we did not care. This incarceration rate proves we as a country and as a community do not care about ADOS men. And so if you're going to talk to me about ADOS men being the white people or why they going to be the Trump, talk to me about why we as a community never cared about them. Listen, we don't even talk about what community means. We talk about the black community. I saw a tweet the other day. A white woman said, the brick incident showed me that we don't really have a community. The brick incident showed you and when a woman got hit in the face with the brick and mass incarceration didn't show you that we don't have a community. You didn't show up for a whole set of men who were warehoused in cages, and you want to talk about one lady with the brick? Now, I'm sorry if y'all don't believe shit, nobody with a brick. I don't want to get hit with a brick. I don't want to see nobody do it. You should not. I'm against these kinds of violent incidents. But what I am saying is that nobody's talking about what community looks like. And nobody's talking about what it means to be in community with somebody. So, wait a minute. You don't show up for all. You got all these ADOS men who got in jail for weed. All this stuff wasn't rape and just running around shooting people. That's not all. People are in jail. People got locked up for nonviolent stuff. People got locked up. People were innocent and got locked up. We're seeing a lot of those exonerations now. You didn't care. You didn't care about that. But you want somebody to shout to the rooftops about the brick incident. You want to talk about when even people talk about marriage and couples getting together and women, I can't find no man. I can tell you what cell block he's on. But it's just being in community. And I said this during Dr. Kaz when I was a doctor at St. Stephen's. Like being in community is supposed to mean something. It means we show up for each other. It doesn't mean you show up when you want this guy or this man to show up and put his body in the way of whatever danger is coming your way, but you don't want to show up for him when society decides that he and people like him are going to be warehoused in jail. When you remember, there was this, oh man, I wish I had thought about it earlier. Y'all remember that New York Times article that came out and talked about there's a whole swath of ADOS men who are just missing. It's like they vanished and they're either dead or in jail. It's like they were taken by aliens, and we're not going to show up for that. We make excuses for that. Oh, they must have done something. You know, they should have got a job, and you could work at McDonald's or whatever. But we don't want to talk about that part. Let me just continue. Let me just continue with a little bit of this study. Imprisonment and the life course. It becomes a part of the life. In addition to increasing race and class inequalities in incarceration, mass imprisonment may mark a basic change in the character of young adulthood among low education black men. From the life course perspective, prison represents a significant reordering of the pathway through adulthood that can have lifelong effects. Consequently, the prison boom, like other large-scale social events, affects a historically significant transformation of the character of adult life. This is I don't even know. And I hate charts that look like this, but this is the way the chart looks. But you got to pay attention. This is white men, and this is first prison incarceration. But look, you have to look to the right because that's point 4. You see point 4, point 6, point 8. Now that's white men. Now I want to if you want to know, it says, if you want to understand what it is percentage of men admitted to prison for the first time. The solid line, percentage of men admitted to prison for the first time. And incarcerated is that broken line, blacks and whites. Now you see, when you look at this, when you look at these lines for white men that goes all the way from 1970 to 2000, you see that's point 4, point 6, point 8. Now I want you to look at the right side of when we look at black men. It's not point anything. It's 2. It's look how it's just it's 2. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You see, this is cataclysmic. This is cataclysmic. Percentage of non-Hispanic black and white men born 1965 to 1969 experiencing life events and surviving to 1999. I want you to look at black men. And I want you to look, white man is the first and black man is the second row. Prison incarceration, look, 6% white men, 31.9% black men. Just, I want you to think about that and think about the context in which we're talking about showing up for people. The context in which we're talking about community. The context in which we're talking about who to protect. The context in which we are electing the architect of the crime bill to the highest. I mean, why? Understand, why in the world, let me take this down for 1 second. Why in the world would anybody think that ADOS men, after experiencing the brunt of this, having friends, if they didn't go to jail, they had people, somebody got locked up. What part of your mind says that man owes the Democratic Party anything? Bringing him and nominating him to be the leader of the party tells them everything they need to know. We ain't even got to, honestly, like, do you even have to talk about anything else? Do you even have to have any kind of additional conversations? See, part of the problem is we don't understand what disadvantage looks like. There is some kind of thing that makes it like that ADOS men, that the masculinity and physical strength means that you can't be disadvantaged in this American life. That's a problem. Let me go to this next one. Because this is some horrific stuff. Now this is another study. I just want to go. We're not gonna go. I just want to go through this real quick. Declining employment among young black, less educated men, and the role of incarceration and child support. Now, here's the thing. Everybody knows if you have a baby, you absolutely Man, woman, you are both responsible for that child, right? But there was a consequence well, I'll just let the study talk to you. So look at employment. We're talking about the percentage. We're talking about jobs, right? Employment population rates for males 16 to 24 years old, 1979 to 2000. I told you I'm just going to go back. I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you this ain't nothing new. So I want you to see the dates right there, right? Now, I'm going to bring it back so you can see both of them at the same time. Hispanic, black and brown, but look at the employment. I want you to look at remember this is employment population rates for males 16 to 24 years old. I want you to look at how the Hispanics are right up there close to, and how they eventually they be right there with the white folk, right? Getting better and better every year. White is blue. That broken line at the bottom is black. So when you talk about men and you talk about jobs, that's what you're looking at. Now this stays, you have an uptick. It looks like in like 1989, and then it goes back down. And the one thing I want everybody, listen, here's what I don't want you to do. Don't get in your emotions about this. Like, I want you to get used to looking at things and not having, looking at policies and just seeing the policy for a second and thinking about what that policy did before you say, well, they should have went to jail, or well, they got to get the child support. So if they can't, no, just look at the policies, because what we're talking about is outcomes. We all agree that the child needs to be taken care of. We all agree that nobody would, certainly not me, see a ADOS woman trying to take care of a child and somebody done scooted off and done started a whole new life somewhere, child. And she over there trying to take care of a kid. Because that used to happen back in the day when you couldn't find nobody, child, he went for cigarettes and he left. So we all want the family, the kids to be taken care of, but we have to think about policy outcomes and think about how, like, stuff happens in our community, and the government society ain't gonna be no fix for it. we ain't gonna be no fix for none of this. This is policy, because you can give people, just like we have the earned income credit, there can be other credits too to kind of help subsidize certain things for low wage earners. I'm not talking about somebody who makes good money. We're talking about here low wage earners. So let's just continue right here. This is a very similar chart. Hold on one second. Raise males. Oh, the other one we just did was ages 16 to 24. This is the one we just did. This one right here is ages 25 to 34. Looks very similar, right? Looks very similar. What you're seeing is you're not having better outcomes because you're older. Like, you are not seeing better outcomes. You're not seeing more employment, right? And so they get into, like, let's talk about some reasons why that might be. So the results show that employment and labor force participation rates among young white and Hispanics, less educated men, are fairly comparable with one another. So Hispanics and whites are doing about the same. This is years ago, and they're doing about the same. How will they, fam? Let me just say. Hold on a second. Let me just come out of this for a second, because I got a rant for just 1 second. How did we ever, when you look at that chart, let me come back to this chart. When you look at this chart, I'm gonna put it up in the corner. I'll put it up in the corner. When you look at it. Look at both these charts. How in the world? Wait a minute, didn't the black line went below the thing? Look, when you look at these charts, how in the world, and you see Hispanic men tracking with white men, how do we ever come up with Hispanic and brown, Hispanic and black and brown, Hispanics and blacks? How do we ever come up with that? They tracking what they supposed to track, especially as people ain't been here longer than us. That means America is working for you. If America is working for you, your name don't never need to be beside my name. If America's working for you in a way that it certainly ain't working for me, Hispanic and black don't need to ever be beside each other in a sentence. Not ever. Not even in terms of none of that. Don't never need to be beside of nobody. Don't never need to be here. Why in the world? Like, what was the failure in our academic sphere that this was allowed to happen? There is no sameness here. You get to immigrate here at some point and then still be with the white people. You are white. We get to be here 400 plus years and we still stuck to the bottom. And that's where your men are right there. So let's go to some of the stuff they said about it. The results show that employment and labor force participation rates among, we saw this right there, fairly comparable to one another. But these rates among comparable young black men have lagged behind those of the other two groups over the entire period. The entire period. Employment rates for all three groups show some cyclical movements, with decline in the early 1980s and 1990s for each. Cyclical movements in the labor force participation are less pronounced. It is just the most ridiculous thing. During the 1990s, employment rates among white and Hispanic young men stabilized after declining somewhat in the 1980s. These declines have been analyzed elsewhere and have been attributed to the declining real wages experienced by these groups. But the declines experienced by young blacks are greater during that decade than for other groups of men, and they continue during the 1990s. If anything, the decline in the labor force activity for black 16 to 24-year-olds is greater in the 1990s than the 1980s. Your life gets worse. So black men are watching their life get worse. Okay. Despite the stronger economy of the latter period and higher attainments. Now hold on one second, of young blacks. Now see, they said a good economy. So let me say something about that. So they said even with a good economy, these ADOS men did worse. They didn't get no better. So if that is the fact, a good economy and their outcomes were still trash, why should an ADOS man go somewhere and say, I'm going to vote for Biden because I care about the economy? Because that's what they say. You should vote for Biden because you care about the economy. What they know, let me tell you, a lot of what's happening with ADOS men is they are intuiting things that they can't necessarily explain, but they know it don't make no sense. Things do not get better for them when the economy just does better. So if that is the life that you know, that things don't get better for me, and the data proves that things didn't get better when the economy was better. So just because there was a good economy and everybody said things were booming, with this group of men, life did not get better. So how in the world now can you expect to come to me and talk about something as general as the economy and expect me to say, okay, that's enough for me to vote for Biden? You have to come with something very specific. You have to now earn the vote of ADOS men, and you're not doing that. What you are doing is diminishing them and ridiculing them. And people keep thinking that's going to fly. I just don't see it happening. Let me go to another one real quick. With regard to child support, the growing establishment and enforcement of child support orders tends to raise the expected value of the order against non-custodial parents by raising the probability that any such order will have to be paid if one has regular earnings. Furthermore, these orders constitute a large tax on the earnings of the low-income non-custodial fathers. Child support orders for low-income non-custodial fathers are in the range of 20 to 25% of income. When combined with payroll taxes and phase out ranges for food stamps, the marginal tax rates on these men are often high at 60 to 80%. If non-custodial fathers are behind in their child support, states will garnish up to 65% of their take-home pay to cover their child support payments, which is the federal limit on wage garnishment for debt purposes. So when you think about a policy outcome that may protect the child, and 65% of your wages and you are low income is a lot. So when you wonder why you're not in the labor force, what's the incentive of being in the labor force? So you may say, well, maybe the father gets access to a larger amount of food stamps and a larger amount of government help as long as he stays in with his child support. But what you were supposed to do, what this country was supposed to do when it found that low income men were being taxed at 65% sometimes for child support, the country was supposed to step in. You don't have to take nothing from the child. See, people give us false choices all the time. Well, if he got to pay it or else the baby go without. No, we have other ways that we can help him help his child. right? We have other ways that the government, we've always figured out, and we do it through the custodial parent has some things that they can get through the taxes when you file, stuff like that. Good stuff. You have to figure out a way to incentivize work. And if all the money from work is going here, 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 that's great, but somebody got to eat. So what happens is you come out of the labor force, you find a different way to eat. Policy is supposed to answer some of these questions. But the problem that we run into, the real crux of this whole thing, is that people have decided that the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, everybody has decided that ADOS men are not old policy prescriptions that help them, right? We will talk about, as we rightfully should, we should talk about ADOS women and maternal health care, and we should talk about how, ADOS women have the worst outcomes, the third world outcomes in terms of childbirth and things like that. Those are things that we should fix. When we talk about ADOS men, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about ways to fix their life. We don't talk about ways to improve their outcomes. We just started talking about mass incarceration, but that's only one thing. It's an extremely important thing that nobody dealt with. And so you have to talk about it, and the solution, even if you talk about mass incarceration, is not just letting them out. Because when you let them out, you're going to let them out into our community. They're going to be back in ADOS communities when you didn't give them no skills. You didn't give them no psychiatric care. Because they didn't get to go see a therapist. Like, what is it like to come out? Your child was 2 years old when you went into a cage, and he's 22 now. And running up, he was like, Dad, when he went there, he ran up on you now. What's up, Pop?